You're standing at 4,000 meters in the Hindu Kush Mountains. The temperature is minus 30 degrees Celsius. Wind screams across treeless slopes. And the only thing between a family and death is a shelter woven from goat hair. Not a modern tent, not Gore-Tex or ripstop nylon. Hair from animals. Afghan nomads lived in these black tents for millennia. They survived conditions that kill unprepared mountaineers in hours. The tents moved with them, 500 kilometers between summer and winter camps, dismantled in 2 hours, rebuilt in a day. They blocked wind at minus 30 degrees Celsius. They breathed in summer heat, reaching 40 degrees Celsius. They shed rain, released smoke, kept condensation from freezing a family in their sleep. Women built them. Women who couldn't read or write but understood material science modern labs still can't quite replicate. The tents worked for thousands of years, and now the last generation who knows how to build them is dying. This is the story of mobile architecture that kept people alive in one of Earth's most hostile environments. Engineering woven by hand, tested by nature's cruelest extremes. Forgotten as war and borders and settlement destroyed the nomadic life that created it. Chapter 1. The Hindu Kush doesn't negotiate. Afghan nomadic groups, mostly the Kuchi people, moved through landscapes between 2,000 and 4,000 meters up. Winter temperatures regularly dropped to minus 30 degrees Celsius in the highlands. Wind chill made it worse. Summer in those same places could hit 40 degrees Celsius. The environment demanded solutions that could move. Permanent structures were impossible for people following seasonal grazing patterns. Settled peoples built thick-walled compounds. Nomads needed shelter they could take apart, load onto camels, and put back up in days. The nomadic calendar wasn't random wandering. It was precision timing built over thousands of years. Summer camps sat in high mountain pastures, yaylak, where temperatures stayed moderate and grass grew thick. Winter camps dropped to lower valleys and southern plains, kishlak, where the worst cold eased slightly. The tent had to work in both. Migration routes often stretched 300 to 500 kilometers. The shelter had to be light enough to carry, but tough enough to protect families for months. The problem they solved: create mobile architecture that keeps humans alive in temperatures that kill, using only materials you can grow, harvest, or make with your hands. No lumber yards, no hardware stores, no fossil fuels. Afghan nomads herded mostly goats and fat-tailed sheep, both built for mountain terrain. Goat hair had properties that synthetic materials still can't quite match. The fiber's natural crimp and texture let people work it without industrial tools. Unlike sheep's wool, goat hair came from animals that thrived on sparse mountain vegetation. The goats ate what grew at altitude. Their hair became homes. This wasn't primitive. This was sophisticated engineering developed through generations of life or death testing. The landscape shaped the solution. Harsh mountains, seasonal extremes, the need to move. The tent answered every requirement. Chapter 2. Black goat hair has natural oils that resist water. That's where the engineering starts. When the fibers get wet, they swell. The weave tightens. Rain hits the tent. The hair expands, water runs off. When it's dry, the weave stays slightly open. Smoke from cooking fires escapes. Air moves through. Condensation, which will kill you in freezing conditions, doesn't build up. The tent breathes. Modern technical fabrics try to do this. Gore-Tex, Event, proprietary membranes that cost hundreds of dollars per square meter. Afghan women did it with hair. No patents, no laboratories, just generations of watching how fiber behaves. A single tent needed hair from an entire herd collected over multiple shearing seasons. Women held the technical knowledge. They did the weaving on ground looms during encampments. A mobile industry. The strips of woven goat hair, usually 40 to 70 centimeters wide, got sewn together to make panels. Tents were modular. Families could add or remove sections based on household size and wealth. A medium family tent might have 12 to 15 woven strips, hundreds of hours of labor. Old sections could be replaced as they wore out. A tent could last decades if you maintained it. This is the Siyah Chador, the black tent. The structure used tension, no rigid frame beyond support poles. Center poles gave you height for standing and living. Perimeter stakes pulled the fabric tight. The profile stayed low, often only 2 to 2.5 meters at the peak. This cut down wind resistance. In mountain gales that could rip apart a poorly designed shelter, that mattered. Rectangular or slightly trapezoidal floor plans, usually 4 to 6 meters wide, 6 to 10 meters long for a family unit. Guy ropes, sometimes 30 to 40 per tent, spread wind stress across the entire structure. You could pitch the tent tighter or looser depending on weather. Tighter for winter storms, looser for summer ventilation. The black color wasn't about looks. It came from using dark goat hair without bleaching or dyeing. Black fabric absorbed solar heat during the day, warming the interior even in winter. The dark color also hid soot from cooking fires. The tent kept its appearance longer. In some regions, brown or mixed color tents showed up based on whatever herd genetics were available. Modern outdoor companies are still trying to copy what Afghan women engineered centuries ago. Waterproof but breathable. Durable across decades. Repairable in the field with basic tools. Made from renewable biological materials that biodegrade when you finally discard them. The black tent solved problems that nylon and polyester still struggle with. Condensation management, long-term durability, repairability. And it did it without petroleum, without industrial looms, without venture capital or material science PhDs. Women held this knowledge. Girls learned weaving starting around age 7 or 8. The knowledge wasn't written down. It lived in skilled hands and observant eyes. You remove the women who knew how to build these tents. You lose the technology. That's happening now. But we'll get there. First, you need to understand that the tent alone wasn't enough. At minus 30 degrees Celsius, fabric, even perfect fabric, can't save you. The tent was the shell. The survival system was everything inside it. Chapter 3. The tent interior was divided using woven reed screens or hanging textiles. Men's section, usually the side facing the opening, for guests and public activities. Women's section and cooking area, usually the rear or side, was the core heat source. Storage along the walls created insulation barriers, felt bags, grain sacks, equipment stacked up. Every layout choice was thermal strategy. A ground hearth or raised metal brazier provided heat and cooking. Fuel depended on region. Dried dung was primary fuel in treeless highlands. Scrub brush, sometimes wood. Dung burned slowly with steady, moderate heat, good for long winter nights. The tent's breathing weave prevented carbon monoxide buildup while holding heat. Smoke rose to the peak and escaped through the porous fabric. In extreme cold, some families used heated stones in metal containers as radiant heaters. But layered insulation on the ground was what kept people alive. The ground was the main cold source. Floor insulation mattered most. First layer, woven reed mats, hasir, created airspace between ground and living area. Second layer, thick felt sheets, nomad, made from compressed sheep's wool. Felt could be 3 to 5 centimeters thick, real thermal barriers. Sleeping quilts, kurpacha, stuffed with wool or raw cotton, worked as mattresses, heavy wool blankets and sheepskin covers for warmth. In extreme conditions, multiple family members shared sleeping areas, body heat pooled. The chapan, long quilted coat, was worn constantly indoors and out during winter. Multiple layers underneath, inner cotton garments, wool middle layers, outer wind-resistant fabrics, sheepskin jackets with wool facing inward for extreme cold, head coverings and wool socks worn all the time. The logic: maintain body warmth so the tent only needed to blunt the worst cold, not create tropical comfort. Winter diet shifted to high-fat, high-calorie foods that generated body heat. Warm dairy products, milk tea with butter and salt consumed throughout the day. sheep tail fat rendered into cooking oil and added to most dishes, hot wheat or rice porridges for breakfast. The constant tea kettle on the fire provided warmth and hydration without cooling the body. Dried fruits and nuts were portable, calorie-dense nutrition. Food was fuel. Winter camps chose locations with natural windbreaks, valley walls, rock formations, dense tree stands, close to water sources that wouldn't freeze completely. South-facing slopes got maximum winter sun. Multiple families camped together, creating windbreaks for each other and sharing resources. Tents positioned with backs to prevailing winds, openings facing leeward. Systems thinking. The tent was the anchor point of a complete thermal survival system. The breathable tent, the layered bedding, the central fire, the high-calorie diet, the clothing, the camp positioning. Remove any single element and it collapses. Modern survival culture fixates on gear, the right jacket, the right sleeping bag, the right tent. Afghan nomads understood something deeper. Survival is integration. The tent worked because of the felt. The felt worked because of the fire. The fire worked because of the fuel. The fuel worked because of the herds. The herds worked because of the migration. Everything connected. To Chapter 4. An experienced family could take the whole thing down in 2 to 4 hours. Every piece made sense for transport. Tent panels got rolled, poles bundled, stakes went into bags. Camels and horses carried the heavy fabric, 80 to 150 kilograms for a family tent. The load spread across several animals. Everything inside, felt, bedding, cooking gear, also built to roll up, stack, and tie down. A family of 5 or 6 might need 4 to 8 pack animals just for the tent and basic household stuff. This was what made everything else work. Villagers had to take whatever weather showed up. Nomads could leave. If early snow hit the summer pastures, the whole camp could move in a few days. If winter got worse than expected, groups shifted to lower ground. Mobility mattered as much as the tent. Records show nomadic groups had lower death rates during extreme weather than settled people. They could run. Tent sections could be added when families grew, or taken off when they didn't. A damaged panel could be cut out and swapped without redoing the whole structure. Tools for fixing the tent traveled with them. Big needles, goat hair thread, spare fabric. Women checked and repaired tents constantly during stops. A tent that was looked after could last multiple generations. Sections got replaced as needed. Modular design before anyone used that term. Modern relief groups spend millions developing temporary shelters that deploy fast and reconfigure easy. Afghan nomads figured it out with goat hair and passed down skill. Tent making went from mother to daughter through hands-on teaching. Girls started learning weaving around 7 or 8. The knowledge wasn't written down. It lived in trained hands and watching closely. Migration routes, where to camp, reading weather, managing animals, all oral. Losing an elder who held that knowledge could endanger a whole community's ability to survive. The tent gave them economic options. Families could chase trade. Nomads swapped animal products, wool, meat, dairy, hides, with villages for grain, tea, metal tools. The tent let them position along trade routes when it made sense. That economic movement created a buffer against local crop failures or market crashes. Hard to tax them. Hard to draft them into armies. Hard to control where they went. Governments hated it. But nature didn't care about borders or settlement rules. Nature cared about one thing. Can you make it through the next winter? The black tent said yes, for thousands of years. Portability wasn't extra. It was the whole point. The reason survival worked across places where staying put meant dying. Modern people build permanent houses and hope the weather's kind. Nomads built permanent skills and moved when it wasn't. Different approach, different logic. The tent was mobile infrastructure. What made a flexible survival strategy possible? And that flexibility is what broke the system when the world shifted, when borders locked down, when wars turned movement into a death sentence, when governments decided nomads had to settle. Can't be mobile in a minefield. Can't migrate when the route's a battlefield. Can't pass skills from mother to daughter when daughters grow up in camps. The tent handled minus 30 degrees Celsius winters. It couldn't handle the 20th century. Chapter 5. The Soviet invasion began in 1979. Landmines rendered traditional grazing areas deadly. Routes families had traveled for millennia became kill zones. Nomadic populations fled to Pakistan and Iran as refugees. Young people grew up in camps, without herding, without migration, without learning to weave goat hair panels or read mountain weather or position a tent against winter wind. The knowledge transfer broke. Conflicts from the 1990s through recent decades kept the disruption going. Taliban periods, American intervention, Civil War. The violence never stopped long enough for normal life to resume. Normal life was the tent. Normal life was the migration. That ended. Government policies, both Afghan and neighboring countries, pushed settlement even before the wars. Education systems required children to stay in one place. Medical care access favored settled populations. Land privatization and border controls restricted traditional routes. Economic changes made settled trade more profitable than mobile pastoralism for many families. Manufactured tents became available. Canvas, synthetic materials, cheaper than goat hair production when you measured direct cost. Plastic tarps offered quick weather protection without the labor of weaving. The time investment in creating traditional tents became economically unviable. But synthetic materials lacked the breathability of goat hair. They trapped condensation. They degraded under UV exposure. They couldn't be repaired in the field with a needle and thread from your own herd. Short-term cheaper, long-term worse. That trade-off defined the transition. Most traditional nomads are elderly now. Younger generations may still herd, but often use modern tents or semi-permanent structures. Some families maintain one traditional tent for cultural identity while using modern materials for daily living. Women elders hold the tent-making knowledge. Fewer young women learn the complete skill set. You can document it. Anthropologists have. Cultural organizations have recorded techniques. Museums preserve examples. But embodied knowledge is different. The feel of proper tension in the weave. The judgment of when to tighten guy ropes before a storm. The repair intuition that comes from building and rebuilding the same structure for decades. That knowledge lives in hands. When those hands stop working, it dies. The goat hair tent uses sustainable, biodegradable architecture from renewable resources. The breathing fabric technology addresses problems modern outdoor gear still struggles with. The integrated survival system approach offers lessons for emergency preparedness. The modular, repairable design contradicts modern disposable culture. Indigenous engineering solutions often outperform industrial approaches in specific contexts. Afghan nomads proved that for thousands of years. And there's this. Proof that humans can thrive in extreme environments without fossil fuels, without industrial supply chains, without permanent infrastructure. The tent was more than shelter. It was a complete alternative to settlement. Autonomy, mobility, self-sufficiency. Poetry centered on tent life. Music, stories. social structures and gender roles organized around tent-based living. The loss of tents means the loss of a complete cultural worldview. Some cultural organizations teach traditional tent-making now, among diaspora communities, in Afghanistan when security permits. Academic research has documented construction techniques and material science. Tourism in some regions created economic incentive to maintain traditional tent building. But living tradition is different from museum preservation. The challenge is keeping it as practiced knowledge, as something people do to survive, not something they perform for cameras. We're watching sophisticated engineering disappear in real time. Knowledge that sustained human life in one of Earth's harshest environments. Solutions to problems we still face. How to create shelter that's portable, sustainable, resilient. The people who knew how to do this are dying. Their daughters live in cities. Their granddaughters may never see a black tent except in photographs. What are we losing when this knowledge disappears? What might we still learn from it? Those questions aren't rhetorical. They're urgent.